So in this video, I have a Dell 3020 SFF PC from the Haswell generation that I picked up, which I will be using for a future budget gaming PC build, sort of. And yeah, this is just a typical Dell Office PC with, all the usual Dell 3020 features. Here's the bottom sticker, I guess, and also here's the top. There's nothing on it. And here's the back side, where you can see there's lots of ventilation for both the fan on the heatsink on the CPU, as well as you can see I put in a graphics card on this, which is a GT 1030, which will be the basis of this being a sort of a gaming PC. And in this video, I'll show you guys how I optimize the airflow on this thing so that it's actually bearable while playing some games instead of overheating and having cooling issues. Because Dell has some pretty stupid design decisions with this case, especially. Anyways, here you can see that there's the GT 1030 that I put in over here, as well as this also has an optical drive, and they all have like these quick release clips that you can take off the drive, as well as the graphics cards and also everything basically. And you can see that the front fans are located here, and there's just one 80mm fan which will just suck in air from the front and just blow cool air across, while the power supply has a plastic shroud that covers the front of the power supply, which has a fan onto the front of the case so that it draws in its own fresh air. Then the hot air from the case just gets sucked into the CPU cooler, then this shroud just directs it to the back. The only problem is that Dell doesn't really seal it up properly. There's a big gap on top here, so the air mostly just recirculates. So what I had to do was basically modify the shroud with some tape so that it can actually seal to the case and actually exhaust the hot air. So I'll just take it off and show you guys here what I did. And here you go. Slowly taking it off, as well as the fan cable, because I'm looping it over top so that it doesn't have any gap under the shroud. And yeah, it's kind of difficult because I actually taped it onto the case and tested it out, and it actually works. It directed all of the hot air out to the back now. So as you can see here, I added a lot of extra tape onto the shroud, and as a start I added some tape onto the bottom so that it can actually seal onto the motherboard instead of leaking air all over. Then on the sides and the top where it doesn't seal to the case, I just added some tape, so now it actually does seal to the case. And it actually can exhaust hot air, because otherwise it just gets recirculated inside, and it doesn't really have an exhaust fan in this case, so it just gets hotter and hotter, and that's not very good when I'm adding a 30-watt graphics card on top of the CPU here. And for the specs, I have a Pentium G3260, as well as 4GB of RAM times 2, so 8GB, as well as this GT 1030 over here from Gigabyte. And as you can see here, I did something really weird as well by using some paper that I cut up and fit it onto the heatsink. And the whole reason for that is to direct airflow from the heatsink so that it doesn't recirculate around itself, because it's really close to the power supply, and if I don't do this, the GPU gets 3 to 5 degrees hotter. And with this, it's actually gonna stay below 80 degrees most of the time, even while overclocked. And what I do is basically just cut out the paper, so that it fits directly onto the motherboard and seals up the airflow. So what happens is that the front fan on the graphics card is gonna blow half of the air through the heatsink and get out this way, while the paper will seal it off and prevent it from getting sucked back in by sealing it off to the power supply. And what about the side, you say? Well, I have this contraption here on the side panel, which I will just show you guys, this piece of paper that basically just seals it off and creates a partition so that the hot air from the graphics card can't just directly recirculate onto the graphics card again. Instead, it has to come out through the back or up and through the CPU heatsink and get exhausted out the back by sealing the graphics card sides on and the power supply sides onto the side panel using that piece of paper. And it does help the heat get out as well through the back. And you might think, how does it get out to the back? There's no vent, but there's actually a small vent under the graphics card here, which is pretty useful in this case because it actually does allow quite a lot of the GPU hot air to just exit straight out the back. And that's, even though it's really small, it's really quite enough for just a small GT 1030. Then the rest of the hot air just gets sucked into the CPU heatsink and, like I said, gets exhausted out the back because of my modified shroud. Now you can also improve the airflow if you just remove the optical drive if you're not using it. And you'll also, as a bonus, get an extra SATA slot, because right now I'm only using one SATA SSD and there's no additional storage in this PC, and it's really quite limiting. And if you take out the optical drive, not only you get free airflow from the front, but you also get an extra SATA port that you can use for an additional hard drive, for example. And yeah, that's it for this video. I'm just showcasing this Dell 3020 and how I optimize the airflow. I'll have a more fully featured video on how I turned it into an HTPC/gaming PC for a low budget. And yeah, thanks for watching.